When people say that the West has fallen, it's not hard to see why that may be the case. With degrading societal conditions, crime being rampant, and trust in government being at some of the lowest it's ever been, along with other signs such as increases in drug and alcohol consumption and abuse. And it's fair to say that with the West falling, there's perhaps no country that's fallen as quickly or as badly as the UK has. As someone from the UK, this is something that I've seen myself firsthand. The decline in all aspects of UK society has gotten so bad that many of the country's most valuable citizens, the millionaires whose taxes the government loves, and the young people who would be next up in the workforce, have all opted to leave the country in hopes of finding better opportunities elsewhere, because they see the writing on the wall just like everyone else here. The UK has been in a decline for decades with absolutely no sign of that turning around anytime soon, if it ever does. A country that was once a superpower in the world, and was so powerful in fact that it ruled about a quarter of the Earth's land, along with it dictating almost all the world's trade and economy back in the Victorian era, has in the course of a little over 100 years slipped into a sorry state of itself, a far cry from where it used to be. If you were to look at the UK now, you'd find it hard to believe it could ever be considered a world superpower, let alone perhaps one of the most dominant superpowers the world had ever seen. But how did the country I've grown up in and spent my whole life in get into such a pathetic and degraded state? Well, let's look into the issues and see what can be found. Now, obviously delving into the issues of a country with a population of around 60 million and condense them down into just a handful of points isn't going to be the easiest and isn't going to cover everything, because the issues with the UK are more than could be counted. From a shrinking economy, increases in taxes, the wealthy of society fleeing, resulting in the government trying to increase taxes again to make up for lost revenue, only to lead to more people leaving of different wealth brackets. It's a domino effect that started a long time ago that can't really be narrowed down to one point that started it all. Now that's a bigger, more macro issue with the country, however many of the issues start at the lower, more ground level. If you were to wander any of the city streets, you'd realise that there was another issue at hand as well, with many of the formerly locally owned businesses closing down and being replaced instead by vape stores, Turkish barbers and American candy stores, many of which, or more likely the majority of, being regularly used for money laundering. Something that is very well known to everyone in the country, although nothing seems to change or happen as a consequence to them, and every year more and more of these stores just seem to appear. Meanwhile, the cities where these businesses reside in are being left to rot by the government, with roads you can barely drive on due to the size of the potholes that you could lose your car in, to the buildings that are decaying away from years of neglect. There's absolutely no incentive for anyone to take care of anything anymore. If there's no reason for anyone to stay and enjoy where they live and people just want to leave, why take care of what's around you when you're just going to leave it behind anyway? This is the kind of thinking you can see in the smaller cities outside of London. Places that used to be considered great and beautiful by the country's historical standards, but have fallen into disrepair, such as Blackpool being a major one, along with other smaller cities and towns outside of London. Blackpool was once a jewel of the country many years ago, something that you'd find very hard to believe if you looked at it now. However, it was the place to holiday in the UK, welcoming down some of the richest and wealthiest in the country with its attractions at Blackpool Pier, shows at the Grand Theatre, and with a bustling seaside economy and community where everyone was welcome but has now fallen into disrepair and appears to be on. Once being the home of the British seaside holiday, Blackpool is now ranked as not only the most dangerous town in Lancashire, the county where it's based in, but it's also ranked one of the most dangerous places to live in the entire country, causing it to more than likely fall even further into its decline. As if no one wants to visit there due to how unsafe it is, how can it possibly hope to attract any money to increase its attraction and appeal? Blackpool also suffers from many of the issues that just about every other city in the UK suffers from as well, with many of the local businesses being forced out not only due to many of the cash-only, potentially money laundering businesses I mentioned earlier, but also by the massive businesses such as Aldi, Lidl and Tesco who force out the local grocers that can't even hope to compete on prices and product selection, along with fast food takeaways popping up in even the smallest towns, putting pressure on local restaurants for cheap, quick food, many of which are aiming to cater for the foreign and international students. Many of the opportunities that were once present for locals to improve their livelihoods has slowly been taken away from them. The wages in the UK have never really been high, especially when compared to other countries. However, the state of them has only gotten worse over time, with none of the jobs in the cities outside London offering much growth potential. In many places, if you were to become a manager of your local store, Whether it's a family-owned store or one of the local corporations that have pushed them out, you'd only be potentially making marginally more than minimum wage, taking on the responsibility without much of the reward to follow. But with finding a job in the current economy becoming harder than ever before, taking any job that pays is worth just about whatever comes with it. With a lot of businesses either just not hiring at all or many of them going out of business, the opportunities just keep shrinking and the cities are starting to fill with empty buildings and boarded up windows as more and more places continue to shut up shop, resulting in even less reason to go into the towns and cities as there's just nothing there anymore. Now, if you were to go further north away from London, you'd see that these issues would only get worse from here, with just as much crime and even less opportunities. Historically, the divide between the north and south of England, and the UK as a whole, is that the people from the south are considered smarter but more delicate, and people from the north are idiots but very rough and ready. You might have heard a northerner and southerner talk and call each other a northern monkey or a southern fairy, insulting each other but getting along just fine like we all do here, and this was reflected in their jobs as well, as the South and London has always been a home of finance and intellectuals. The largest cities always attract the biggest talents intellectually, and up north the jobs were more mining and industrial and plant work, trading off education for harder work, with cities such as Sheffield being a perfect example of this, as historically it was the largest producer of steel in the entire world, even going so far as to be called the Steel City. But past the 1960s, the economy and industry of the North would be forced to change massively, as the factories and mines were shut down, for reasons that are well known to many in the country and that I'm not going to get into for risk of starting something that I don't want to. However, it was somewhat part of a natural effect that happens with developed countries and economies, as over time they shift more towards focuses on education, finance and higher technological jobs, leading to internal production of many resources being shut down almost entirely, and a heavy reliance on outsourcing and purchasing from abroad. This is a natural occurrence, however, and a stepping stone in progression that many countries have seen and moved through, such as America. However, very few countries have handled it as poorly as the UK has, with these towns and cities being left in a state of perpetual decay. The reason for this is due to a lack of any form of investment, whether that's private or public investment. The government has left these areas in such a poor state through policies and forced closure of industries and left them there with no help to follow, resulting in private investors seeing no reason to invest there either, as although there could be good returns eventually, it could take decades to see this. And who knows how much money it would take to even start rebuilding, provided no more policies are brought in that push these areas even further back, leading people to resort to benefits and welfare, a system from the government that in the UK seems to be far too easy to exploit and take advantage of. If you live in the UK, you know this is very much the case, and I'm not saying it applies to everyone on benefits of course, however, many people are aware of at least one or even a handful of people exploiting the system, with this benefits fraud costing the government billions of pounds a year but seemingly no real emphasis on trying to curb it even slightly, let alone trying to stop it altogether. When almost 23 million people, just under 2/3 of the country's population, are being paid some form of benefits, there's inevitably going to be some exploitation made, and to stop it entirely is near impossible. But to not even try to stop it is a different matter entirely, with many people who are working still claiming unemployment benefits, along with people secretly working and getting paid cash to avoid being caught. In 2023 alone, the cost of this on the government was around £8.3 billion, most of which was due to fraud, although some of this additional cost is down to government errors when overpaying people. But you could argue it's all as being government error for not properly checking when giving away the benefits to fraudsters and allowing it to continue. All of this results in the government going over budget and increasing taxes even higher to pay for their mistakes that they have no interest in fixing. All of these costs of mismanagement in the past decades have started to add up, and following COVID and the lockdowns that came as a result, finally put the last nails in the coffin, with many local governments going bankrupt, with 1 in 10 local county councils facing bankruptcy back in 2023, and many of them finally hitting that point last year in 2024. With councils in the Midlands such as Birmingham and Nottingham having already issued a Section 114 notice for bankruptcy, along with councils further south like Croydon having done the same. Although many places in the UK are in a complete state of disrepair, it doesn't mean that efforts haven't been made to reverse this, with the town of Yeovil being one such place with their transformation project. Although it did shut down parts of the city and construction was everywhere, locals were fine with it as they saw it as necessary for progress. However, as the years dragged on and progress slowed down and more mismanagement occurred, People were worried that they would never see any actual change after multiple years since the beginning of the project, resulting in it inevitably going over budget and over its expected completion date, partly due to COVID lockdowns as well. And now the Somerset Council, where Yeovil is located under, is also close to issuing its own Section 114 bankruptcy notice as well. Now I can read all these statistics and articles to you about how poor of a state the country is in. You can visit London and see the nice parts of it and think everything is fine, but go past that and you see a completely different story. You don't feel safe anywhere, and the incompetency of government, no matter who's elected, is shameful. The misery of just about everyone is impossible to miss, so to hear about so many people leaving the country for better opportunities abroad is not surprising at all. The increases of a specific type of crime by certain gangs as well is horrific. Now I can't talk about it for multiple reasons, because of it obviously being such a sensitive topic that wouldn't do well on YouTube, and because it's apparently right-wing to even consider it now, at least according to the Prime Minister. But the fact that the government has voted against even having an inquiry to just look into these reports is, again, shameful. And when you see the politicians laughing and celebrating that they won't be looking into these potential crimes is a sadness and anger that you can't put into words. To see people arrested for posting memes and song lyrics online but not see just an investigation into a very serious crime, not even to arrest anyone, just to investigate, is beyond embarrassing. Hopefully one day the wrongs can be righted and we can see things change, but for now, that doesn't appear as though it will happen anytime soon.